Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. I usually start these videos with a bit of an intro, but I don't have too much to go over this week, so I'll just go through my usual shoutouts here. I do like to give a quick mention to Alex over at Boardgame Co. Him and I do work together keeping track of these campaigns. I do this every week, but he puts a video out at the start of each month going over the heavy hitters for that entire month. So he already does have that one uploaded here, which you can go ahead and check out and see what you can expect for April. I do also like to give a quick mention to Zilla Blitz because he does a similar video, except for Zilla Blitz focuses exclusively on historical war games. This is a genre that both Alex and I don't cover in near as much detail, so if it is something that you're interested in, definitely want to check him out and follow along if you do like his content. I'll have both of these channels linked in the description down below. This week is another shorter one, but I don't think that trend's going to continue for too much longer because I already have 9 games for next week and then 9 games for the week after that. And I normally don't have that many games for weeks that far in advance, so I think the rest of the month is going to be pretty busy and I wouldn't be surprised if it continues that way at least until the summer. But like I said, I don't have much else for an intro and we do got games to cover, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on April 8th, and this one's called The Dragons of Etchinstone. And this one is a solo deck building game that you'll be able to play in the palm of your hands. But this one does work a little bit differently than your traditional deck builder where you're adding cards to your hand or shedding other cards, because in this one you're actually choosing which cards you want to upgrade and also sometimes choosing which ones you want to downgrade. And of course you still can go ahead and play this on the table like any other game, but like I said, this is designed to be played in the palm of your hand. So if you want to go ahead and watch your favorite team lose to Liverpool, or maybe take a nice relaxing cruise, this is a great one to take along with you. Just be careful because I'm not so sure if this one's waterproof. But this is a game that takes you through 4 different regions where you're going to be going on different journeys and fighting different enemies in order to try and level up enough to be able to defeat the final boss. To do all this, you're going to be using a deck of cards, but there's going to be 2 special cards. There is the region card, which is always visible, and you can see it sticking out in the top left here. And this card essentially shows you which region you're in and which enemies and journeys are available in that region. The other special card is the final boss card, and this is going to be a card that has 4 different dragons on it, depending on which way it's rotated and which side's flipped up. But you're essentially just going to be randomly choosing one or picking one that you want to fight, and then you're going to be putting that at the back of your deck. And once you've made it through all 4 of the different sections of that region card, only then will you be able to fight the dragon. But all the rest of the cards are going to be dual use, and you're going to be using those to take actions and also using them to determine which type of encounter that you're about to have for a given round. The way that this works is that each round you're going to be drawing 4 cards from the top of the deck into your other hand, and those ones are going to be acting as your action cards. The next card in the deck that is remaining in your other hand is going to be the card that determines what type of encounter you're going to have, as well as some different modifiers to that encounter. This one has a skull on it, which means that you're going to be fighting an enemy, and then it has a 2 beside it, meaning that you're going to be fighting the second enemy. As I mentioned, the different encounters are either going to be fighting enemies or going on journeys, and your other cards are going to have icons in the center of them. The boots are going to be helping you with the journeys, whereas the swords and shields are going to be helping you with the enemies. You're going to be using these cards and their modifiers to try and overcome whatever type of encounter you have in front of you. Every turn that you have where you didn't defeat the encounter is going to have some sort of negative consequence against you. The negative consequence when you're up against an enemy comes in the form of taking damage, and when you take damage you have to downgrade one of the cards in your hand by rotating it or flipping it so it becomes 1 level weaker. This is not great for you because you will be going through this deck multiple times and you will be using these cards again, so you want to try and keep them as strong as possible. But if you're going up against a journey, you're going to have a different negative consequence for each turn that you're not able to overcome it, and that's going to come in the form of lost time. This of course is also not great for you because it's going to give you less time to prepare and upgrade your deck in order to try and defeat that final dragon. But once you are able to defeat an encounter or an enemy, you'll then get some experience points that you do get to spend to level up other cards. But once you've completed an encounter, you're going to be discarding the cards in your hand and then drawing 4 more from the deck and then going up against the next encounter. This continues until you've gone through the entire deck and you reach the region card once again, and every time that you reach the region card, you're either going to be rotating it or flipping it so that the next region is visible at the top of your hand. Once you've gone through all 4 regions, then you're going to be revealing the final boss, and if you're able to defeat them, then you win the game. This game was originally a print and play, but it's been picked up by Chip Theory Games, and it's getting an official printing now, and this is also created by the same designer who created the game Gloomholden. And if you're not sure what that is, the name pretty much says it all because it's a small version of Gloomhaven that is also designed to be played in your hand. Chip Theory Games also does a fantastic job with publishing their games, and I'm sure this will be no exception, so if this one does sound interesting to you, feel free to check it out, and I will have it linked down below. Also launching on April 8th, we have a new expansion for the game Lion Pirates, which is called Cities of Greed. But if you're not familiar with the original game, this is a game that's going to be playing over 3 different phases. There's the betting phase where everyone gets to take part in a game of liar's dice, and then there's the sail phase where players are going to be moving their ships out on a board to different locations for bonus actions. And then there is the action phase where players will be able to play cards from their hand in order to help themselves or harm their opponents. Your dice and cup are going to be used for that betting phase where you're playing liar's dice, and if you're not familiar with how that works, it's a game where everybody rolls their dice in secret, and then you're going to be keeping them hidden under your cup, and then players are going to be taking turns guessing how many dice of a certain value they think exist on the table as a whole. This means if I raise my cup and I see that I have 3 threes, I could say that I think there's at least 5 threes. The next player has to outdo my bet either by saying a higher number of dice or a higher value of the die that was chosen. So because I bet that there is at least 5 threes, the next player could say something like 6 threes, or rather than increasing the amount of die, they could go ahead and say that they think there's at least 5 fours. But the other thing you can do on your turn rather than increasing the bet is to challenge the person who bet before you. So if you think that they bet higher than what is actually out on the table, you can call their bluff, and then everyone's going to be revealing their dice, and you're going to be checking whether or not their bet was true, and if it was, then they would have won that challenge, but if there's less dice than what they said, then you would have won that challenge. And this is where the betting phase ends and we move into the sailing phase, where almost every player gets to move their ships around the perimeter of this board, positioning themselves on top of a new location on that board, with each of them granting you potentially with a special bonus action. And the reason I say that almost everyone gets to do this is because whoever lost the challenge on the previous round is going to be omitted from this. And also there's only one player that will be able to take the action of the location they stop on, because this is another round that's going to have a bit of dice rolling, and players are going to be rolling their combat dice, trying to get the most swords in order to come out on top, and then that player is going to be able to use the bonus action of their location. This moves the game into the action phase, where each player is going to be able to play cards from their hands in order to gain special bonuses, like gain upgrades or unique dice, or even mess with their opponents in a variety of ways. The game continues like this until one of the players is able to fully sail around the board, and then they're going to be the winner of the game. But like I said, there is also a new expansion here, and this is called the Cities of Greed. This is going to be introducing a bunch of new cards, location tiles, and new dice that you'll be able to mix into the game. This is also introducing a couple new modules with the town cards. These town cards are going to be randomly assigned to the different locations around the perimeter of the main board, and then each player is also going to be dealt 2 bonus cards at the beginning of the game that's going to have 3 different towns labeled on it. These cards come into play during the action phase because in addition to playing your regular action cards, you can also now play one of these cards as well, and whenever you play these cards, any players on any of the locations outlined on that card are going to be affected by it. It's up to you whether you want that to be a negative or a positive effect, because you can affect yourself as well. There's also a bit of a dexterity module mixed in, where players are going to be stacking up dice, and the first player to knock them over is going to be getting some sort of negative consequence for that. Then there's also the new bar fight tile, and when players activate that one, you're going to be going through a blind bidding phase, which I don't know all the details of, but I'm sure there will be some push your luck involved. There's a few other new mechanisms mixed in as well, but if you do want to learn about those, you'll have to check them out for yourself, and I will have a link to this campaign in the description down below. And also launching on April 8th, we have Pulp Romance, which is a solo game that takes place between the 2 world wars, and this is the next game offered in the Pulp series of games, which is basically a bunch of standalone games that have this 1940s magazine style artwork, but then also feature a compact modular design. I don't have much details on the gameplay on this one, but there's going to be 5 different suits of cards cards, the cities, the friends, the detectives, the newspapers, and the bankers. And it sounds like you're going to be playing them from a shared row in your tableau. And when you place a card, you're going to activate it based on what cards it's adjacent to, making your placement and timing really important. There is one more suit called the Rivals, and this is the suit that you're trying to defeat by using your existing tableau, and they're going to be getting in your way and blocking your progress. You also get to choose a character which grants you with unique dice and bonus actions that you'll be able to use to manipulate the cards in a variety of ways. If this sounds interesting to you, or if you're just a fan of solo games, like I said, they do have a few of these out already, and I'm sure they will also be offered on the campaign. But that's all I got for this one, and if you do want to learn more about it, as well as the other games, I will have it linked in the description down below. And also launch on April 8th, we have Helldivers 2, the board game, and this is the next game coming from Steamforged Games, who always does a fantastic job of turning video games into board games. And they have quite a few of these under their belt already, with a few releases of Monster Hunter World, Resident Evil, Dark Souls, and more recently Elden Ring, which I have heard only good things about. And when I say they do a good job, it's not only from a design standpoint, they also do a great job of capturing the spirit and what makes that game special and what makes it different, and then maintaining and incorporating that into the tabletop experience. This is a game that plays over a series of rounds where first the players are going to get to take their actions, and then the enemies are going to get activated after that. During the player's phase, each player is going to be able to choose one card from their hand in order to activate. Each of these cards normally list multiple actions like moving, firing your weapon, throwing grenades, and things like that. And you can do all of these actions in any order that you like. This gives you a lot of flexibility for creating some really cool cinematic action sequences, like blasting a bunch of enemies, jumping behind cover, and then tossing a grenade into the next swarm. All the cards that you have available to you are going to be determined by your personal deck of action cards, your primary, secondary, and support weapons, as well as those grenades and stratagems. Some of the different weapons and gear even add some unique cards into your deck that you'll be able to take advantage of. And once all the players have taken all of their actions, the enemy phase begins, where they're going to be spawning, moving, and attacking based on their AI behavior. There's also no strict player order in this game, so players do also have flexibility with that. Just keep in mind that if you are a bit further ahead from the pack, there is a higher chance that you might get accidentally shot. But as players make their way throughout the missions, you'll be able to unlock medals that you can then trade in for different upgrades and even more powerful gear. And if players are able to complete those mission objectives, then they have won the game. And if you do want to learn more about this one, feel free to check it out, and I will have it linked down below. And also launching on April 8th, we have Neon Hope, and this one's a cooperative campaign-style game that can also be played as one-off scenarios, and players are going to be playing as characters in a not-so-distant future. And something I really like about this is that there's nothing particularly special about your characters, other than they're going to be stumbling into all sorts of different secrets and discovering things that are much bigger than themselves. This, of course, is going to be forcing you to take action, and each of your characters are going to have their own unique set of stats that you're going to be using for different skill checks, their own unique deck of cards that they're going to be using to augment their actions, and each scenario is going to have its own unique mission deck that players are going to be moving through, visiting the different locations, eliminating different threats, gaining bonuses, and hacking and investigating whatever they can along the way. Players win the scenario if they're able to complete its objectives, but you can lose in a couple of ways, either by running out of endurance, which you're going to be losing every time that you need to reshuffle your action cards, or if the surveillance reaches its maximum amount, and that's going to be increasing more and more at the end of each round. You'll still move on to the next chapter, but your successes and failures and decisions along the way are going to influence the way that the next chapter unfolds. And I do want to thank the publisher here because they were kind enough to send me a prototype copy of the game so I can walk through a few rounds, show you exactly how the game plays, and give you a really good idea if this is a game for you. I followed the basic setup here, but there is a little bit more for the particular scenario that we'll just go through together. But you can see I have the setup for 2 players. I have 1 player set up here, and then the second player set up here. Over here, we just have a few player aids, but we have the player token as well as the player's card, and it outlines all their different stats on the left-hand side here. We do also start with a gear card, and this is double-sided, and you just get to pick the side that you want to play with. So even if you are playing with the same character over again, you could choose the other side of that gear card just to mix it up a little bit from game to game. This dial here represents your endurance, and it dictates the amount of action cards that you get to hold in your hand. And like I said, you're going to be using these to augment your actions throughout the game, and anytime that you do use one, can, you're going to be discarding that card until you've completely run out of cards. When that happens, you have to reduce your endurance by 1, and then you'll be redrawing these cards back into your hand, but because your endurance is now 1 less than before, you do have to choose 1 card to put back into the discard pile. Like I said, if your endurance goes all the way down to 0, then that is one of the triggers to lose the game. One thing to note is every time you take damage or stress in this game, you do have to discard that amount of cards from your hand, but we do also have these tokens here known as Hope, and instead of discarding a card, you can discard one of these Hope tokens instead, so they kind of act like health, and there is ways that you can get more of this throughout the game. These 3 tokens are just your action tokens. You get to take 3 actions on your turn, and you'll be tracking that by using these tokens. Each character also has additional gear cards that are specific to them that they'll be able to acquire throughout the game. These can grant you with some additional ongoing effects, but I'll just keep these face down for now underneath my existing gear card. There are some other components out on the table here, but I think I'll just explain those as we play through a round because they'll come into play really quickly. Other than I would like to just point out the surveillance threshold card because, like I said, reaching the maximum amount of surveillance is one of the ways that you can lose the game. You're going to be tracking your surveillance on this tracker at the top here, and there is a bunch of different levels that surveillance can reach, and anytime that surveillance reaches that amount, it's going to be triggering the effect on this card, and you can see at the bottom there, when it reaches 30, that ends the game, and it's going to be moving you forward into one of the possible conclusions. The deck up in the left corner here is the mission deck, which is going to be providing us the dialogue and story as we play through the game, but it's also going to be introducing different characters and different locations and events and opportunities that we'll be able to explore and interact with in a variety of ways. One last thing I should mention before we get started here is that during setup, you can also set the difficulty of a scenario depending on how difficult you want the game to be. And this is set by manipulating these cards here. There's a whole bunch more of these cards offered in the game. You're going to be including a certain amount of those cards depending on the difficulty that you choose to play. There's normal, hard, and hopeless options, and I chose to play on the hard difficulty. But to start the game, the first thing we're going to do is read the introduction here and follow its instructions, and this is going to be introducing you to the scenario, telling you a little bit about what's going on, and in this scenario, a friend has called us to a bar, but they're being very secretive and they haven't told us why, but we decided to go anyway, and then we go to meet them there, and they are not to be found. We tried messaging and calling him, but he's not responding or answering his phone, so the next best thing we can do is search the bar. So this card instructs us to put the siphon location into play, and then that instructs us to put the barkeeper and the bar card above it, and then a dance floor card beneath it. And there are multiple bar and dance floor cards, so that if you play this again, you might get something a little bit different. So I'm just going to choose one of these randomly, and these are going to become locations that we can explore. And each of these cards are going to have different icons on them, and we're going to be adding tokens for each of the icons that are displayed on them. The next card here gives us our objective that we need to complete before we can move on to the next chapter in this campaign. And what it's saying is to flip both the bar and the dance floor cards over. And the way that we do that is by successfully interacting with these locations in order to remove all the tokens that are currently on them. The game also instructs us to put both of our characters onto the siphon location, and when we're at that location, we can interact with any of the cards there, and more locations could come into play. But one thing to note is that no matter which location you're located at, you can always interact with the network cards, which are located in this area up here. This card has a negative effect that's going to be activated at the end of each round, so we do want to try and get rid of this as soon as possible. A round plays by the players taking their actions first, and players can go in any order that they like, but once all the players have taken their actions, we then move into the encounter phase, where time progresses, enemies might attack, and there might be some additional negative consequences as well. Each player is going to have 3 actions on their turn, and each time you take an action, you're going to be flipping one of your action tokens over, but the different actions can either be to move from one location to another location if there was another location in play. We currently only have one location right now, so that's not really an option, but the second option you have for an action is to activate one of the special actions on any of the cards currently at your location. These special actions are going to be located on the card, indicated with one of these action icons beside them, and I don't see any of those on these cards currently in place, so that is also currently not an option. The third option you have is the main action that players are going to be taking in this game, and that is to try and attempt to complete a task. Tasks are represented in the top left corner of each of the cards currently in play. You can see this one allows you to investigate, and the icon beside it represents the stat that you need in order to complete it. And then the number beside that indicates how high your stat needs to be in order to be successful. If you are successful, it'll allow you to remove one of these tokens from the card. When I perform that action, I can interact with any of the cards at my location, and they might all require different stats, so depending on what I'm proficient in, that might dictate which card I might want to attempt. I'm actually going to activate this character first because her stats are a little bit more helpful for us in this situation, because this one requires charisma and this one requires courage, and both of her charisma and courage stats are higher than his. This one requires perception, and both of these characters happen to have the same amount. Since the only action we can perform right now is a task action, I'm going to choose to try and attempt this card so I can show you what these tokens are all about. This task is called Get Support, and it does require 2 charisma in order to complete successfully. I do have 2 charisma on my character, but this does not guarantee success because we're also going to have to flip one of these tokens here. And these can have all sorts of different effects on your action. It can make you instantly succeed or instantly fail, but it can also add modifiers increasing or decreasing your stat by some amount. For that reason, it's good to have a little bit more than what you need, and luckily we do have our action cards here, which can have all sorts of different effects on our action. What's nice about these is that each of them say which task they can help with, and since we're doing the Get Support task, we can just filter through this and find any that say Get Support, and put those to the top of our hand here because those are the only ones that we can consider. This number here indicates how much it's going to be adding to your stat in order to help you complete that action. And then there's some effects here that could come into play either when you perform the action or after you've completed the action, and it might be conditional on whether or not you succeeded or failed. Some of these cards also have a green check mark beside it, and these are really nice because if you're able to use this card and also succeed in your action, then this is going to let you get the benefit of that success a second time. To show you what I mean, I think I will use this card for my first action. And on its own, it doesn't add anything to my stat, but I can choose to suffer 1 stress in order to add 2 to my stat. Whenever you suffer stress, you can either choose to discard one of your other cards or to discard one of your hope tokens. For now, I think I'll get rid of a hope, and that's going to allow us to increase our charisma by 2, so we're now at 4. But like I said, we do have to flip one of these tokens here, so I'm just going to go ahead and flip this one. This token actually does a few different things. It would activate enemies at the end of our action if there were any enemies at our location. Currently, there are no enemies in play, so we don't have to worry about that. But this does still subtract 1 from our skill for this action, which puts us at 3. That's okay, we only need 2, so we're still all right there. But the other thing this does is this token requires us to also flip another token. We'll just go ahead and flip this one, which is another -1, which now puts our stat at 2, which is still okay because we did need a 2 or more in order to complete this. And because we were successful, it means that we get to take any of these tokens on the card and then add it to our supply. These tokens are really nice because you can spend them in order to increase the associated stat by 2, and you also do get 2 charges from each of these tokens. So when you use it your first time, you're going to be flipping it to the other side, and then when you use it the second time, it's going to get discarded back to the supply. But because I also used this card that has the green check mark on it and allows me to gain the benefit of my action twice, I actually get to take 2 of these tokens. So I'll just go ahead and take both of these and add them onto my card to indicate that I can use those later. That was one of my actions, so I'll flip one of my tokens, and the action card that I used is now going to get discarded. And for my second action, I'm going to be investigating this card here to try and get these tokens off so that we can flip it over, because that is the objectives of the scenario currently. And I do have a card that'll help us with this, and this one also does have the green check mark. So if we are successful, we'll actually be able to take both of those tokens off at once. Because this one does require courage, and we do have this token here, I'm just going to go ahead and spend this to add 2 to my stat. That puts us at 5, and we only need 3 to complete this, but we do have to flip one of these tokens, so let's hope that it doesn't subtract too much from our stats. And we got 1 subtracted, and I'm going to go ahead and flip this one next. That one's a 0, so we're still okay. That allows us to successfully investigate this card. We get to take 1 off for doing that, but because we played this card, it allows us to gain that benefit twice. When you completely clear a card, you also get a resource added to your supply, and these are good to spend later for upgrades. And that card gets flipped to its other side, which reveals that we've discovered someone on the dance floor who's going to help us find our friend. This card also has some icons on it, indicating that we do need to put these tokens onto that card. And it also has an effect which has a keyword follower, which means that if we are able to complete this card, instead of flipping it over, it gets added to your supply as a follower, and then the effect is permanently applied to you for the rest of the scenario. But we're moving along pretty well here, so for our third action, we're going to try and investigate this card. This one requires 2 perception, and we do also have 2 perception, so I don't think I'm going to use a card this time. I think we've done a good job getting rid of all the bad tokens in this grid here, so hopefully we get something decent, but I am going to flip this one, which is a -3. Somehow we've dipped into the negatives here, so needless to say, we did not succeed in investigating this card, so we don't get to remove any tokens from it. Luckily, there's no negative consequence by default for failing, unless the card itself indicates that. This card doesn't say anything, so we just lost a turn here. We didn't get to remove anything, but at least we got this really bad token out of the way, and we didn't waste a card on this one. Those are our 3 actions, so now it is the next player's turn. They're going to attempt this card here with the Get Support action in order to try and get one of those tokens. And we do have a card that will help us with this, and it's going to add 2 to our charisma, which is nice because we only have 1 to start, so this puts us at 3. But the other reason that I chose this action is because I do want to show you how other players can help you on your turn, because now that the other player has these tokens, they can actually spend them on another player's turn in order to add additional stats to that player. So since I flipped that token, we're going to be adding another 2 charisma to this player, so they are now at 5, which puts us well above what we need to succeed here. And let's see what we happen to flip here from the grid, and we'll just go in the corner, which is a -2. We're still well above what we need in order to take a token. And since we do need perception to complete this card, I'm going to take the perception token into my supply. This card also has the effect that if you succeed, you can choose any player, and then they have +2 charisma or +2 technology during their next task this round. I'm the only player left to go in this round, so I'm just going to select myself. And probably the smart thing to do here would be to take advantage of that and attempt this card again, because it does require charisma, which I just got boosted. But we don't always play smart here, and I do want to show you what happens as you progress through the chapters. So for my next action, I will be attempting this card here, which does require perception. Let's flip our action token and see if there's any cards that can help us along the way here. And this card's really nice because it does come with the green check mark, which will allow us to take an extra 1 off if we are successful. It actually allows us to take off even another 1 if we do succeed by 2 or more beyond the threshold we need. Since this requires 2 and I want to exceed it by 2 in order to get that extra bonus, I'm going to be flipping this token here to increase my perception to 4. I feel like our odds are pretty good because we flipped most of the bad tokens already, at least I hope. But I really don't like this side of the grid, so I think I'm going to flip this one over here. And that's actually not terrible because this one is not only an instant success, but it's also a green check mark, which means that we also get to gain the bonus of the effect an additional time. So this is actually the best case scenario because we succeeded, which means we get to take 1 of these off. And then I played this card, which had the green check mark, which means we get to take a second 1 off. And then because we exceeded it by 2 or more, that allows us to take a third off. And then this check mark allows us to take the last 1 off, which allows us to flip this card over. We've completed it, which means I get to add a resource to my supply. 2 tokens get added to her character. And each of these new characters that we've discovered in the bar do also have some flavor text, giving us a little bit of clues as to where our friend might be. And that's why thematically flipping 2 of these allows us to complete the Chapter 1 objective. Now that we've done that, we're going to be flipping this card to the other side and following its instructions. And it says that we see our friend next to a blonde woman and a bald man. We try to get his attention, but we hear a loud sound behind us where a bunch of people in uniform are pushing through the crowd. And then our friend and his companions head down a neon-lit corridor. The instructions say to put the backstage setting into play, and this says to add 2 random copies of the strangers in the dark above it, and 2 more below it. Throw 2 above it, 2 below, and then we flip this card over to its other side. The instructions also say to draw 2 enemies from the enemies that are provided at this point in the chapter, and then these enemies are going to be appearing at the location where the characters currently are. So we just drew 1 for each player and put them into play. The next objective says that we need to find our friend by discovering the hidden basement card and then flipping it. I assume that means we're going to have to explore these strangers in the dark cards in order to discover the one that gives us a clue as to where to go next. So let's go ahead and load those up with the tokens that they need. So we got some enemies in play and things just ramped up quite a bit because this enemy actually does not allow us to move away from our location. Luckily, I do still have 1 action left, so I could try to fight that enemy. I only need 1 courage to successfully inflict damage on this character, but I need to inflict 4 damage before this card will get permanently discarded. Alternatively, there is another value here, and this is the retreat value, and if I'm able to get equal or higher than that, then that's actually going to flip this card over temporarily, eliminating any of its effects while it is face down. Unfortunately, this character is not the strong one, and I only have 2 courage to start with, but I think I will play this card that does help me with fights, and it does also have a check mark, so if I'm successful, I can deal 2 damage to him. And this actually comes with a couple more benefits, because this is going to add an additional stat to my courage for each success I've already had this round, and I've already been successful twice, which means my courage is now at a 4, which actually might do pretty well for me in this battle. So let's go ahead and flip a token and see what we get here. And we got a 0, which is good for us because that means we've inflicted 2 damage because of that check mark. And also the card does get flipped over as he retreats momentarily. And we discard my card, and that is all the actions we can perform, which means that we're going to be moving into the encounter phase. The first thing we're going to do is look at all of the cards in play and check if any of them have effects that trigger at the beginning of the encounter phase. This one does, and it says that each player is going to suffer 1 stress at the beginning of the phase. We can choose to discard a card or a hope, and we're each going to discard a hope. The nice thing about the encounter phase is that it does allow us to put 1 hacking cube onto any of the hack cards in the network, which does help us to get rid of these eventually, even if we didn't perform a hacking action during the round. Our surveillance is also going to increase by 1 for each of the players in the game, so that means it's going to be increasing by a minimum of 2 every single round. But then it also increases for each of the enemies currently at your location. Because this one's flipped over, any effect it has is nullified, which means that this is only going to increase once more for the 1 enemy that is still face up. The first threshold here triggers at 5, and we're only at 3, so none of these effects are going to trigger. But now each retreated enemy card does get flipped back over. And the whole reason that this phase is called the encounter phase is because each player is now going to draw an encounter card from the top of the deck. And almost every decision in this game can be discussed between the players to try and figure out what the best strategy is. But drawing these encounter cards is the exception to that rule because these cards can present different options to the players, but you're not allowed to discuss with the other players at the table. You just have to make a decision on your own and hope that no one hates you for the decision that you make. This first player drew this profiling card, which gives them the decision to either increase their surveillance by 1 or suffer 2 stress. Since I'm making this decision on my own and the other player has no say in it, I don't want to lose 2 stress, so I am going to be increasing the surveillance by 1. That's still not so bad because, like I said, the first effect doesn't trigger till we hit 5. So as long as the other player doesn't also increase it, we should be okay. This card just gets discarded, and let's see what the other player drew. And they actually lucked out because I don't think there's very many of these cards in the deck at all, but this one actually allowed them to gain 1 hope. Mostly all of these cards are negative, so seeing that is a lucky break. But now each of the players are going to be flipping their action cards back to the other side. And the next round is going to continue the exact same way with players using their actions and spending their cards and tokens in order to interact with the different cards to investigate, get support, or even fight different enemies. Now that we have 2 locations in play, we can also use an action to move to this location, except for the fact that this character does not allow us to move so long as he is in play, so we either have to get him to retreat again or fully defeat him and remove him from the board. And now that there are enemies, we really want to be careful because if we happen to draw more tokens like this, this can actually trigger the enemies to attack. And when they attack, they're going to be activating their specific effect here. This card would cause 2 stress, which means that you have to discard your cards or your hope tokens. And like I said, when you do run out of cards, you're going to have to reduce your endurance by 1 in order to get those back into your hand. You can only hold the amount of cards that your endurance is currently set at, which means that you would have to choose one to put back into your discard pile. But if players are able to make it through their enemies, complete the objectives that show up in the mission, and make it through that entire mission deck, more of the story is going to be revealed, and hopefully you end up at a conclusion that puts you in a better position when you play the next scenario. When you do get to a point where all these tokens have been flipped, you're just going to be putting them all face down again, adding these 3 that we took out at the beginning of the game into the mix, shuffling them up, taking 3 out again, and then continuing as normal. A really fun game here that's really easy to teach and play, and I really like the way that the narrative's been presented so far in bite-sized chunks, not revealing too much, but giving you just enough that you do want to see what happens next. The game also involves quite a bit of push your luck, which is one of my favorite mechanisms, and there are some additional components that will make an appearance as you play throughout the rest of the game, like these different stat dice here. And for those of you out there who are also fans of RPGs, I do also want to mention that they are providing a completely different role-playing game on their campaign as well that takes place in the same universe. So if you like the theme on this one and you're interested in RPGs, definitely check that out as well. And all of this will be linked in the description down below. And also launching on April 8th, we have Starleap, and this one's a competitive racing game where each player is going to be controlling 3 frogs, and you're going to be trying to be the first to get to the end of the track first, which is going to be gaining you victory points based on placement. But then players are also going to be trying to acquire bugs, which will give them additional victory points at the end of the game. This is a game where each player has the same set of movement cards, but then you also get an interrupt card, which you can use out of turn to make an additional movement, as well as a unique special card. Players are taking turns, and on your turn you can play a movement card to move one of your 3 frogs. The reason this is called Starleap is because if there's any frogs in front of the frog that you're moving, you do get to leap over them, which does grant you with additional movement, and it is a key strategy to this game. Each space you land on can also have icons on it that can grant you with additional bonuses, like the rockets, which move you even further, the portals, which can teleport you to another area on the board, the stars, which allow you to draw additional bonus cards, the asteroids, which grant you those space bugs, which grant you additional victory points, and planets, which can give you some permanent upgrades. Whenever you play a card, it does stay in front of you until you've used every card in your hand, and at that point, and only that point, are you able to take all the cards back into your hand in order to play them again. The game ends as soon as one player gets all 3 of their frogs to the finish line, and then you're going to be tallying up all the victory points based on placement and those different bugs that you're able to catch, and the player with the most victory points wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And launching on April 11th, we have Tumbleweed, and this one's a 2-player abstract strategy game that has a really interesting line of sight mechanism, which you're going to be using not only to determine your placement options throughout the game, but it's also going to be determining your final scoring. This is a game that plays over a series of turns back and forth between the players, with each player choosing between one of 3 possible actions on their turn. They can either place one of their dice out onto the board, or instead they can choose to replace any die with another die of their own, or finally they could choose to pass, and that is the end game trigger for the game, because as soon as both players pass sequentially, then that's going to trigger the end of the game, and it's going to be moving into scoring. You might have noticed that there's 3 different colored dice out on the board. The red and white are just going to be the players' respective colors, and then the gray one in the middle is just a neutral die that is added during setup. And you do set up the board with 1 die of each color, and that is really important because if you don't have a die out on the board, there's no way for you to place another one. And this is where that line of sight mechanism comes into play, because anytime that you place or replace a die out on the board, the die that you're putting out needs to be in line of sight of at least one of your dice. You never get to roll these dice either, because the value of the die when you do place it out on the board is going to be equal to the number of your dice that are in line of sight of it. And to explain this a little bit more simply, let's say that it was our turn and we're playing as white and we just put this die down on the table. The reason that this one is a 2 and the reason that we were able to place it here is because it's in line of sight of this die as well as this one. Since it's in line of sight of 2 of our other dice, that means that we get to place it as a 2. Let's say I went to the other player's turn and then it came back to us. And then on our next turn, we wanted to place this die here. Well, it is also a 2 now because it's in line of sight of this die, as well as this die over here. And then let's say our opponent had a turn and then it came back to us again. We would now have the option to replace this die with a 3 because it's now in line of sight of 3 of our other dice. It doesn't have to be your own. You can actually replace any die out on the table, so it is more beneficial to try and replace your opponent's dice because every die that you have on the table is worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. And also each empty space that has more of your dice in line of sight than your opponent's is also going to grant you a victory point at the end of the game. But the reason that you can't just go ahead and just replace all of your opponent's dice constantly is because the only way that you can replace an opponent's die is if you have enough dice in line of sight of it in order to replace it with a higher value die than what it is. In this example here, if it was our turn again, we could go ahead and replace this neutral die with one of our own because we do have 1, 2, 3 dice in line of sight of it, which means that we can replace it with the 3, which is a higher value than its 2. I think this one looks like a lot of fun. I haven't seen a mechanism like this before, but I think it does a really good job of keeping that rule set very simple, but then providing a lot of really crunchy decisions and strategy when deciding where you want to place your dice in order to have as much line of sight to other dice as possible in order to upgrade them with more of your own. It's a really clever design, and I think it does a great job separating itself from the other abstract strategy games, especially because I just haven't seen this ever done before. I'm not saying it hasn't been done, I just haven't seen it, but they're doing it here, and I think they're doing a good job of it, so if you think this one looks like a lot of fun as well, you can go ahead and find a link to it in the description down below, and of course you can click to get notified once this one launches. And that's everything I got for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still have an awesome giveaway to announce, and this one's for a pledge for good Puppers Too. And this one's a drafting game where players are going to be playing cards in front of them into different columns depending on the breed of dog that they're putting into play. Each of the cards have different effects that you can try to take advantage of, often allowing you to rotate your cards in order to make them worth more points at the end of the game, but whichever card ends up on top of each of your columns of cards is also going to be dictating some sort of scoring objective that will gain you even more victory points at the end of the game. And I do want to thank the publisher here for donating the Everything tier, which is not only going to get you good Puppers Too, but it's also going to get you the original good Puppers game in the series, and it's also going to get you all 10 of the Puppers pins. This one is only offered in North America, so this is another one that I'm only going to be drawing from the comment section down below, so if you do want to enter, feel free to say anything you want down there, just make sure to leave the hashtag Pupper. And if you are looking for something in particular, maybe you let us know what your favorite dog is or what your favorite pet is in general, because this giveaway is not limited to just dog people. For myself, I respect all animals, but when it comes to a pet, I think I am more of a plant person. Good luck in the giveaway, but now let's go ahead and draw the winner from last week's giveaway, and we did have a few. We had Hercules and the 12 Labors, Fear of the Dark, and also Duelgeon, and 2 of these were run over on the Discord, so if you did enter Duelgeon or Fear of the Dark, be sure to check the Discord, but the one that we didn't run on the Discord is Hercules and the 12 Labors, so we're going to have to go ahead and draw the winner for that one. And this was another one that was only offered in North America, so I am only going to be drawing from the YouTube comments here because it's the only way that I can be sure that the person who wins is actually in North America. We got the hashtag, let's draw the comments and draw a winner. And the winner of Hercules and the 12 Labors is Andy Caller 504. Congrats on the win. Just email me at adam@shelfclutter.com. I'll get that pledge all sorted out for you. Thanks for tuning in and joining in on the giveaway. I'm happy to help get another game added to your shelf. And thanks for everyone else who also entered. Don't worry, there will be more to come. So until then, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
What?